Let's be honest, playing somebody who's been through a harsh event or has been traumatized in one way or another in most TTRPGs is pretty common. And that's because most TTRPGs focus on adventuring, going out and doing something, telling an awesome story, fighting the bad guys, yada yada yada, etc, etc, etc. But almost all of them, at least the ones that have a large focus on combat, have a world full of terrifying monsters that are out to get you. So yes, of course, at one point you're going to want to play somebody who's been through a traumatic event and has to be able to overcome that. It'll likely be a large part of their backstory, it'll likely be something really important to them, but it's difficult to do. One, it's difficult to handle those subjects because they're pretty sensitive, honestly. Talking about somebody who has been through a horrific event means that more than likely there's a lot of triggers that could potentially be there that would cause harm to people at the table. Not only that, it's also just difficult to try and remember what your character has been through and play that realistically. It can oftentimes be overbearing to the other people in the party, especially if you're the person who never stops going on about the trauma that you've been through. Always talking about the incident or that time I went through this one thing and oh, I'm so traumatized from it. I think we've all seen things like that, and so it can be extremely difficult to try and get through that and really play towards that character. So how do you do it? Well, honestly, I think there are a few different things, but the number one example I could think of is Sidney Prescott from the Scream movies. Now, yes, the new Scream movie is coming out kind of like right now, which is why I'm making this video, but at the same time, when I was trying to figure out an example of the archetype I wanted to tell, Sidney kept coming to mind. For those of you who haven't seen the Scream movies, Sidney is somebody who is repeatedly a victim of constant traumatization by, well, just a whole host of people in a sort of whodunit scenario. It's a lot of the charm of those slasher movie series, and I really love the Scream movies, but Sidney is a unique character because she tries so hard to overcome the issues. We see Sidney go from a scared girl just trying to survive the horrible scenario she's been put in, to by the end being a very battle-hardened survivor, which is, of course, what we want to try to talk about on how to play without being annoying, and I don't think Sidney ever becomes annoying. Yes, she is your typical final girl in a horror movie. She is constantly getting into danger and being a problem to everybody around her, but she takes responsibility for that. And that is the first thing that I would recommend when trying to play these types of characters. Take responsibility. Understand that what you've been through isn't something that everybody else has been through, and Sidney understands that as well. Many times when she tries to help other people, she understands she's essentially in a horror movie. I mean, honestly, the whole Scream movie series is extremely meta, but she understands what she's dealing with and does her best to try and help other people understand that for their own safety. Now, does she always get through to them? No, not necessarily, but she tries very hard. And so if you translate this into a TTRPG setting, you consider it like this. If you're somebody who has faced, let's say, a dragon before, you know how terrifying they are, you know how dangerous they are, how powerful, how they could blow down an entire mountain with their strength, and you don't want to face against them one-on-one. You understand this. But if the whole quest is about killing a dragon, and everybody else in the party gets annoyed with you because you constantly tell them how much you don't stand a chance, yes, of course they're going to get annoyed. Imagine you have this grizzled old war veteran and you're supposed to go on this grand quest to fight this dragon because it's the last hope for the kingdom, and the entire time you're saying, we're never gonna survive. There's no chance that we would ever be able to go against it. You all haven't seen what I've seen. This is a suicide mission. Once or twice, sure, it could add some interesting contrast and comparison. But if you do it over and over again, eventually everybody's just gonna think, why are you here? If you're that convinced it's gonna be a problem, why are you coming with us? You're just constantly saying that we're going to die. We're supposed to be going on this quest to save everything. Why are you being a problem? And that's honestly the most common issue I see when people try and play this archetype, is they lean too heavily into the fact that their character has seen so much. Yes, your character's seen a lot, but let them use that in a positive manner. Sidney Prescott goes out of her way consistently to warn everybody of the dangers while still being a proactive protagonist. She goes after the killer many times. She insists on trying to solve the mystery. She doesn't let them just do things to her. She has taken what she has learned in the past and the trauma that she is exceedingly familiar with and uses it to better the killer every time. And I think that's what you'd want to do. So we'll rewind and take the same example. This battle-hardened veteran who's seen the terrors that a dragon can use and instead warns everybody of what they should expect. I've seen its breath weapon. I know how powerful these things can be. If we're gonna get around it, if we're gonna beat this thing, and I still don't know if we can, we have to make sure that we're not grouping up because it'll be a death sentence to us all. Their scales are harder than anything to get through. If we're going to defeat it, we're gonna need some magical weapons on our side. Constantly giving advice and understanding that what you've been through should be a learning experience for everybody. That is one of the best ways I think you can play the Battle-Hardened Survivor and really keep everybody in the loop and feel like you're a genuine addition to the team. The other thing that I really appreciate about Sydney is she is always moving one step forward. She understands that she's gone through a bunch of stuff, but she uses it to prepare herself for the next time. And you can use this in pretty much any TTRPG. We see that she practices fighting, knows how to use a gun, keeps one on her at all times. And in the same way, in whatever TTRPG you're playing, I think you could do the same thing. You could explain most of your character's abilities as you preparing for the next event. You've been through something, you know what's out there, and you're going to be prepared for it. Not only that, you can go even further of trying to prepare specifically for what you went through. Again, using the example of the veteran and the dragon, if you really are a character who's been through that and went through such a terrible thing with the dragon, if you're playing D&D 5e or Pathfinder, you could choose a specific class that has something to do with dragons. In D&D 5e, it could be the ranger, and you could take dragons as your preferred enemy. Or if you were going Pathfinder, you could choose the draconic subclass for the barbarian, knowing that you have embraced what you saw and now it lives within you, and when you see a dragon, it will receive your rage as recompense. Point is, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, of making sure that this trauma that your character's gone through made them stronger. In the same way, when you put a material into a kiln and let it go through the heat in order to be able to grow stronger from it, so too should your character. And yes, there are going to be emotional effects that will be very difficult to roleplay. And honestly, my best encouragement for that is go actually look into and research symptoms of PTSD or other things. Now, I will be honest, I am not an actual therapist. I'm not trained in that, and I'm not going to pretend that I am. So I would heavily encourage you to be sensitive about this, talk to the other people at the table, and do your research to know what it is that you're going to do. And also make sure this is a topic and a theme that your table would even want to explore. If this is something touchy or something that doesn't vibe with the fun kind of atmosphere that they're looking for, don't do that. Instead, find another avenue of exploring it. But I do really think that Sydney Prescott is a great example of how to do this and play this archetype. Being the Battle-Hardened Survivor can be an amazing addition to your party, adding experience, a grounding reality, and, well, kind of just the grumpy old person stereotype that sometimes fits so well into a party. But you have to make sure it works well with everybody and your DM. I would heavily encourage you to talk with your DM about what your character's gone through and make sure you guys are on the same page on what that's going to look like. Otherwise, it can ultimately end up being a lot less fun than you might have initially anticipated. So communicate, make sure you know what your character's gone through, and use it to make them a more interesting and prepared character rather than just one who's constantly naysaying, because it's not going to go so well and it'll be a lot less fun for everybody. If you do all that, you should be able to make an incredibly fun and interesting character. If you want to hear more archetypes and how to roleplay them, you can go check out the playlist right here and go through my whole catalog, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of these videos this whole month, so I hope you guys enjoy.